Hello, I think we're on finally. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. They've changed all the settings on Facebook and the browsers and things, so I've had to mess about with that. We are now here, and I've got hopefully, if anybody wants to ask any questions, popping up here next to me. I've taken the ones from the comments on the post over the last couple of days, so thank you for those. I'll try and get through as many as I can. So feel free to drop me questions during the course of this as well, and if I can answer, then I will. So here we go. First question that came across is what help is there for families who are self-isolating long-term due to illness or other vulnerabilities? So the example that was used in one of the questions was parents with disabled children who are all as a family forced to stay at home. The answer is hopefully a lot. First protocol and simplest thing from a structural point of view is always to try and find friends or family or neighbours who can help you out and perhaps grab you shopping and things on their own when they go and do their own shop. But there's other help that's out there as well. There's multiple places you can go and sign up. They include there's a government website, so if you search government vulnerable supports, something along those lines, then you'll find the link to be able to sign up there. So if you had a letter, NHS letter, explaining that you are vulnerable for health reasons, you can sign up there. And over the course of the coming days, trying to organise that to make sure that people get in touch to support you if you need it. There's also a local version. So if you search for Nottinghamshire Coronavirus Hub, whether you've had a health letter or not, if you're just in need of support, you can sign up there, submit your details, and know exactly what it is you need, whether it's help with medical stuff, whether it is a bit of shopping, or whatever it may be. Sign up there, as I say, Nottinghamshire County Council Coronavirus Hub. Have a look. There's a couple of Facebook groups for people who are offering support. One that I'm aware of is one called Mansfield Helpers. Have a look through Facebook, ask questions on there, see if anybody's willing to help. And one of the questions was around shopping and online shopping. So some retailers have set up priority services for the people who've had vulnerable letters from the NHS. They include Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's are doing that. And I mean, if you are struggling, have a look at local businesses as well, independent businesses, because a lot of retailers have switched to online services, to delivery services, obviously, with stores having been closed in many cases. So have a little search around for the local ones as well, who might appreciate the custom as well as being able to help you. Question two, why are public sector staff on full pay whilst others are suffering financial losses? It's difficult. The short answer is that government can control public sector pay and it can't control private sector employers. We've decided that in the vast majority of cases, we want to guarantee income for as many people as we can across both sectors. I think that's the right thing to do. So obviously in the public sector, we're in a position to directly control who gets what. That might mean that you are able to go off sick and still get paid. We'd like to guarantee that across all sectors, which is why we've introduced all the schemes that we have, the job retention scheme for private sector employees, a similar scheme guaranteeing income for the self-employed. Now, unfortunately, with these blanket schemes, we have to put things in that are broad, that are trying to kind of catch all, because we have to actually administer them, and it's impossible to pick out, millions and millions of individual circumstances and put in bespoke schemes for everybody. We've tried to be as broad as we can, um, but that means that inevitably some people slip through the net. So hopefully, please do get in touch with me or with the DWP is often the best place to go if you feel like you are missing out on those supports. But we're just trying to guarantee support and an income for as many people as we can. I'm more than happy to answer questions on specific circumstances. If people want to drop me an email or a Facebook message, then I can do that. And something's cropped up this week by particularly kind of anti-government political questions about a vote in 2017 on public sector pay. A couple of constituents who are well known to me, shall we say, for being not Conservative supporters, asking why I supposedly voted against public sector pay rises. I would just say, and I will answer that straight. I think it goes back to 2017 when there was a vote on the Queen's speech, which is not a normal vote. The Queen's Speech is considered to be a vote of confidence in government. This is 3 weeks after the 2017 election when I first got in, and Labour put forward countless amendments to those kind of proposals in the Queen's Speech. It effectively lays out the government's agenda, and you either vote for the government's agenda or you don't. And if you don't, then that spells a pretty difficult time for government if it can't even pass its own basic agenda. So it's not as simple as saying, did you vote for or against the pay rise? It was a Labour amendment to the Queen's Speech. If it had passed, it wouldn't have made any difference to anything. What I did was vote for the Queen's Speech and for the government's agenda and against the Labour Party's agenda, which is a fairly straightforward thing to think about, I think. And as I say, shortly after that, we did take away the public sector pay cap and have agreed ever since to all of the recommendations on public sector pay rises. So not as straightforward as is often the case as a one-line description of what a vote is might suggest. These things are never really explainable in one line. But I did want to clear that up. It wasn't a straightforward vote on shall we or shall we not increase people's wages. It was a vote of confidence in government. So I guess that covers that. But again, I've tried to answer that where it's cropped up on social media, and I'll continue to do so. Will there be more support for businesses and self-employed when this is over? I think we're reviewing it all the time. I mean, I am what they call PPS, Parliamentary Private Secretary, in the business department of government. So I'm responsible for basically answering all of colleagues' questions, MPs' questions on behalf of their constituents through the department. And we are reviewing these schemes all the time. We're trying to fill some of those gaps that do exist. We're trying to make sure that we support as many people as we possibly can. There are going to be people and businesses who get missed, unfortunately, but we are trying our best to fill those gaps as quickly as we can. But I think when this is over, yes, there is likely to be more help in different ways. It depends entirely on what the landscape looks like when we get to that point. Which nobody quite knows yet in terms of which businesses have done okay, which ones have gone, and how we need to pick the economy back up. But there certainly will be packages and support in place for that. When will the current measures be reviewed, and we'll decide the next steps? I think what we've said basically over the course of this weekend is that we want to have a look after the Easter weekend. The initial lockdown, if you want to call it that, measures are due to last until the beginning of next week. So we need to look ahead of that as to what we're going to do. That will depend largely on what happens this week in terms of people sticking to the health advice, staying home unless you've got a reason, legitimate reason to go out, work, exercise, whatever that may be. If people can do that, and if the figures continue to plateau, as we've seen in some parts of the country, London in particular, yesterday's figures for deaths were lower than the day before. If that continues, then we'll be able to be in a position to look at how and when we can start to reopen things. If that doesn't continue, if people can't get out, stick to the rules, and those numbers continue to rise in a way that is worse than it could and should be, then we'll have to extend that or think about how we tighten it. So the answer, I think, is next weekend, the beginning of next week. In terms of times, what that looks like depends on what happens over the course of the coming days. A lot of people asking me about shops and what that looks like in terms of how we can strengthen the rules about who can go in and all the rest of it, how we manage that. The honest answer is that there is a limited amount we can do because these are private businesses. Supermarkets run their own measures on this. A lot of them are being very sensible, and most of the problems I've found have been kind of managed through conversations with management of those shops. My wife works in retail as well, so I get the full gory details of everything that goes on, and some of the people who clearly are flouting rules and coming down for a wonder with the wife and 5 kids to have a nosy about and buy 2 chocolate bars, which clearly is not on. I know a lot of supermarkets have introduced measures to prevent more than one person from a household going in. So you're not just strolling around as a family, you're one person going in for essential shopping. Obviously, people have limited number of customers allowed in the store at any time. At Aldi, where my wife works, I know you have to have a trolley so that they know how many trolleys they've got, they know how many people are in, and they're limiting things that way. Most of the time, supermarkets are being quite sensible. I know some aren't, and government talk to the major chains almost daily about how we can change and improve things, what support we can offer. Again, local police have a role to play in enforcing some of that, and a lot of stores have also brought in security to try and enforce rules as well. Um, I mean, it's incumbent on all of us too to not be there if we don't need to be there. But I know government, as I say, talk to supermarkets on a regular basis about what measures they are introducing, how they're working, and what that looks like. Speaking of police, another one of the big questions, arguably the biggest one over the weekend, has been, with the good weather and all the rest of it, how do we enforce these social distancing rules, and what powers do police have to do that? Honest answer is it's not easy. As I say, it's incumbent on all of us to stick to those rules, to perhaps have some of those conversations ourselves with people who aren't in our communities. But police do have powers to break up gatherings. The emergency legislation we passed before Parliament finished a week or so, a couple of weeks ago, gave them that power to break up gatherings of people in public places, to enforce social distancing measures with fines. We'll look at, if we need to, how we can toughen that up, bigger fines or bigger stick from an enforcement point of view. But police do have powers to do that. So do report things on 101 or through, actually, the police have really good social media in our area. You can search for Mansfield or Warsop police on Facebook and drop them messages through there. I've actually reported crimes that way myself before. So keep in touch with them, keep in touch with me, and I'll feed those things in as well where there are specific problems, or if there are, repeat offenders, where we can evidence that. Absolutely. The challenge, of course, being that you can't have a policeman on every corner at all times. So it does rely on us as members of the public, as the community, to feed that stuff in to them. And I'd encourage you to do that. Some people have asked me about domestic violence, which is a huge concern, and we've seen figures, obviously, with people being stuck at home, potentially with abusive partners or in difficult relationships. That has been more of a challenge. You've seen that increase, as you can imagine. Tensions rise when you're stuck together in a small place. So in terms of what support is out there, services continue. There's a National Domestic Abuse Helpline. The number for that is 0808 2000 24/7. That's run by Refuge, I think, who are the biggest provider of shelter accommodation for victims of domestic abuse. There's Women's Aid, and there's also a men's service, which is a different phone number, 0808 801 0327. Do get in touch with them, or the police, obviously, if it's an incident that's happening, an emergency. But those services carry on. There's been more support put into local government to try and tackle things like that financially over the last few weeks to make sure that those services can continue. And obviously, if you are in an abusive household, you can still leave. The government isn't advising that you should stay in a place that's not safe. So, please access those services as normal if they are needed. Liam, posted something about a consultation about removing NHS beds. It's a bit of a scare story that I just wanted to cover. So there is a proposal, a consultation not by government, by one CCG group in Surrey, by a local NHS service that looked over the last 6 months or so about how they might basically cut down the basic cost of managing facilities, which included removing some beds. They had a consultation that finished yesterday, which is what Liam has flagged. It's not a government plan, it's not a national plan. It is one local CCG asking some questions of their community. So I just say, don't worry about it. Obviously, we're massively scaling up the number of beds with emergency hospitals and things like that. At the minute, there are no plans to reduce them. Foreign travel. This has been a really difficult thing for many constituents. I've had a number contact me who are stuck abroad. Not easy situation at all. There is a direct foreign office phone number if you are still there, but I think most, so get in touch with me if you need that. But most constituents now are in a position where they've had contact about getting home if they want to get home. In terms of travel restrictions, people have been asking, why aren't the airports shut down? Why aren't all the flights banned? Truth is that flights have been reduced by about 95% as a result of all of this, both some of it enforced in that there are travel bans around the world. There are government advices do not travel for anything other than essential reasons, and also the economic challenge of airlines that can't make that happen financially. So there are very few flights coming and going from this country. Those that do continue um, are needed, to be honest, to transport people for essential reasons, whether they be medical staff, whether they be scientists, whether they be government officials. Um, some flights need to happen. We need to get supplies into this country. We need to get the freight here as well to bring in key items, PPE and things for the health service. So that's why planes continue to fly. Um, yeah, so hopefully that answers that pretty clearly. We will look at, and we do regularly review all of these things in terms of what restrictions need to be in place. But at the minute, um, the scientific advice and practicalities demand that it kind of is what it is, and that some flights are able to come and go for essential reasons. Will this change the country and the government's long-term plans, the way we've had to tackle this coronavirus crisis? Well, inevitably, yes. I mean, we're going to be left with a very different economy at the end of all of this. We're going to be left in a situation where lots of business will need support, lots of individuals will need some more support. You might have seen figures over the last few weeks with 1 million people signing up for universal credit over the space of 8 or 9 days. The country is going to be different economically and in who is doing what and what support people need. So we're going to have to look at things in a slightly different way. I hope that it's an opportunity to change the way services are provided, to make our local services more effective, to take away some of the bureaucracy, both for business and in local government and places like that, so we can get things done. One thing that we have proven, particularly with things like the Nightingale Hospital, where you can build and open a new hospital in a fortnight, actually, where things are required to be done quickly and properly, we can do it. When we streamline things and when we get on with it, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to streamline things and get on with it all the time. So we need to look really carefully at the rules and regulations that manage all sorts of different services and areas and businesses, and make sure that we are as effective as we can be, because clearly we could do things better. So I think it inevitably will change things. I hope, and the consensus from most constituents, although it's incredibly difficult if you are financially hit or if loved ones have been affected by this, the feedback seems to be quite positive in terms of the way it's all been handled. It's difficult to envisage, and around the rest of the world, it's hard to find anywhere that has put as much financial clout and support behind businesses and individuals as we have in this country. Hopefully people are, if it's possible to be content in the current situation, at least happy that we are doing everything we can do. If you, as I say, fall down the gaps in some of this support and services, do get in touch. There's a website called businesssupport.gov.uk that lays out all of the advice in terms of what packages are there for employers and employees and businesses, self-employed, which is a good place to start. As ever, if you are experiencing symptoms, stay home, isolate yourself for 7 or 14 days if you're in a household, and if symptoms persist, if it gets worse, call 111 for advice. Do not go to A&E, etc., etc. All the regularly reported advice that is out there. If we can all stick to that advice to stay home wherever possible, then hopefully in the not too distant future we can start to return back to a level of normality. But my team and I are here to help and answer questions wherever we can. So do feel free to drop us a line. You can Facebook message me via my public page, which is just Ben Bradley MP. Give it a search. Or through this group, you can post on here as well. Email address ben.bradley.mp@parliament.uk, or the office number is 01623 372 016. Give us a call if you need to. I am going to spend much of the rest of my day responding to questions from constituents and also from colleagues in my role, my government role, about the business support that's on offer from the business department. and I've also got conversations scheduled with local government and with the police about their services, trying to feed in some of the challenges to find answers to some of the questions from constituents, and also to take some of what is happening back to government where there are things that we could do or improve. So whilst I'm at home, as you can see, continuing to try and make sure we fill these gaps in support, try and make sure that local services are supported as best they can be, and always available if needed. I'll try and do another one of these next week, so feel free to drop me over more questions. Have a good week.